Hey guys, and welcome back for day 2 of Design Fest, with today's theme being Day of the Dead. As you may have been able to tell from the title, my original idea was to go with something more along the lines of the actual Day of the Dead celebration. But in thinking up ideas, I just couldn't help it. My inner Tim Burton fangirl took over, and I decided to go with something more along the lines of Corpse Bride, with the dead rising from the grave and all that fun stuff. Again, same as yesterday, my main focus isn't gore, it's more the cartoony and general fun aspects of the design. Unless you count bones as gore, of course, then sorry. I think it goes without saying that the main challenge shared among all of these pieces was trying to find the skeletal anatomy of my characters. I tend to draw my characters in a slightly exaggerated style with the usual anime tropes of bigger eyes. I also tend to draw limbs more curved than normal, legs extended, and of course, the overall anatomy much skinnier than your average person. So it was pretty weird to try and envision where exactly bones would lie underneath all of that. I know that's how most realistic or more schooled artists may tend to think, but for a self-taught artist barely going to art classes now, it was pretty odd to say the least. This was actually the first time I've drawn anything skeletal. Sure, I've drawn characters that may appear they are, or things like skeleton tattoos, but I've never gone under the skin before. The closest I've gone was yesterday's design with Ash, but that was barely anything. Just a whole lot of skeleton cleavage. And that wasn't even accurate to the bones you have there. I do think I drew some of the bones a bit too stylized and curved, but overall I think most of the bones turned out okay. Now, I kept the same design going from day 1. I just thought it was kind of interesting to see two different interpretations of the same dead characters, and I intended to keep the same deaths as well. But I did bend things just a bit for Crow here. So for Crow, I kept everything pretty tame, with just the patella, fibula, and tibula showing. God, who names these bones? I also showed some of the clavicle, scapula, and humerus. And of course, a bit of skull and mandible for good measure. As you'll see with Ash's and Ray's designs, I do get much more comfortable with the whole drawing skeletons thing. Originally, I had planned to draw him with his head in his lap or his head in his hands, but I thought that looked just a bit too silly, so I went ahead and plopped his head back on for now. I did try and take some of the color out of his design, since in the Corpse Bride characters are primarily one color, which for Crow is pretty easy. Most of his design is red, so that wasn't too difficult. I also go back after the recording and I went ahead and played around with the lighting just a bit. If Anna remembers the lighting during the Remains of the Day song, it's kinda like that. You'll see it at the end. I also intended to go and add more detail to the backgrounds, things like flowers and such, but due to size limitations and the fact nothing looked quite right, I went ahead and scrapped those ideas. So for Crow, not much of a challenge overall, more just testing the waters. So speaking of waters, let's go ahead and move on to Ray. So, as you can see, I wanted to be a bit more daring with how much bone is showing. I'm not sure why, but I really enjoy drawing the leg bones. It's pretty obvious once you look at all of the illustrations. I don't know why, those are just the bones I chose to focus on. So, I also did a bit more of the humerus, along with the ulna and radius, and even some cervical vertebrae. Off to the side, I also had my reference of Mayhew, the coach driver who ends up coughing to death and getting run over by the coach Victor's parents are in. Why do I remember that character's name? That is so weird. Anyway, since Mayhew died from a form of suffocation, basically, and drowning is fundamentally kind of the same death, I went ahead and used him as reference, making Ray's face and lips much more blue and purple. I did try adding in pink like they did for Mayhew, but it just didn't look quite right, so I stuck with the cooler tones instead. I think out of all three, Ray probably looks the dirtiest. With Crow, there just wasn't as much decomposition going on, and Ash's clothing is just really dark, so any dirt and grime is kinda hard to see on it. So I think it just ended up showing better on Ray's color palette. I do think the skirt looks a bit weird with only the front bit showing any sign of decomposition, so looking back, I think I either should have torn up the whole hem or just left the skirt alone. Who knows, maybe that'll be a new fashion. It's just like those skirts and dresses everyone was wearing a ways back, those ones that started really short in the front and that got all long and traily in the back. It's just a little more punk and dead looking. Hey, if Emily can still have a white dress after being in the ground for who knows how long, Ray can have a skirt age in just the right way to start a new fashion trend. Did anyone else find that weird? Come to think of it, Emily's whole dress was kinda weird, especially for that time period. Part of me wants to redesign that now. But for now, I'll just go ahead and stay focused on redesigning my characters instead of the copyrighted ones. It was a bit weird going in and adding things like the back of her hair and the bodice that's going to be showing through the bones. It's not often you need to draw literally through your character, unless you specialize in drawing corpses, skeletons, or something along those lines, of course. So for Ray, it was pretty fun. Not too challenging, really. I feel like I should be worried that I keep calling drawing my characters as dead fun, but whatever. It's all in the spirit of the holiday. So let's go ahead and wrap everything up with Ash. So for Ash, since she was the last one for Day of the Dead, I decided to draw what I was most nervous about, the hands. I don't know why, I was just really nervous to try drawing the bones that make up your hand. Maybe because of how different the bones are from the usual anatomy of the hand, maybe it was the angles, I'm not quite sure. But I tried it anyway, and I think they came out pretty well. I think Ash's hands are actually my favorite part of all the finished pieces. I also figured I'd try and show more of the skull since, let's face it, any skull with anime-sized proportions is bound to look pretty weird. Luckily, Ash's eyes are kind of small for most anime standards. They're a bit wide, but they don't take up like 4/5 of her face. So I toned down my focus on the leg bones just a bit, using the slit idea from Emily's Totally Not Time Period Totally Bought from a Store dress, and tried to focus mainly on the arms, chest, and hands. So for Ash, again, you see the skull, mandible, cervical vertebrae, clavicle, humerus, ulna, radius, femur, patella, tibia, and fibula, with the new additions of the carpals, metacarpals, phalanges, and manubrium. That's a weird word. Manubrium. Congrats, kids, you just sat through me naming most of the bones in the human skeleton. Hopefully I've made my biological anthropology teacher proud, or at the very least, someone learned something. Now, I did try and experiment a bit with Ash's chest there. I wanted that whole area to be skeletal to make up for the lack of detail there yesterday, but I wanted to keep the same sort of silhouette. Now, she is wearing a stiff, traditional, old-fashioned corset, and those things just never seem to lose their curvature. I was looking at old decaying corsets, which is gonna look really weird in my search history, come to think of it. And because of the whole whale bones and materials that they use, things basically stay in place. The outside may age, but the actual shape stays pretty well. It's not like those wimpy plastic ones many mass-produced corsets are made of today. Seriously, have you ever worn a cheap corset and compared it to a higher-end one? It's not fun, let me tell you. The one I wore didn't even have real whale bones. How did women function back then? Now, I did consider putting a hole through Ash's corset so you could see the boning of the corset, not her skeleton, and the decomposition of the materials, but since I just did that same idea with Ray, and I felt like that was a bit too close to Emily's design, I went ahead and decided against it. I did try and hollow out her face just a bit so it looked a little bit more dead, but with the heavy makeup she normally wears, it still seems pretty normal for her. Darn me and my gothic character design! So while Crow was my general experimenting ground and Ray was my more color testing area, I think Ash is just my favorite piece today. I think this is probably going to be pretty reoccurring since I draw the characters in the same order you see them. I test out ideas by drawing Crow first, I experiment a bit more with Ray, and then I use whatever I learned from the last two in Ash's design. While I have the designs mentally planned out prior to me drawing them, any artist can tell you how things appear in your head and how they're actually executed can be dramatically different. But I think you'll see in the final pieces, I really think Ash's design is just executed the best. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments. If there's something you think I could have done differently, let me know and I can try it again. Later though. Not right now. Later. Kinda want a bit of a break after this. So that was day 2, the Day of the Dead. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you tomorrow for the theme of Someday My Prince Will Come. I really think you guys are gonna enjoy that one. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye for now.
Hey, come here, listen. Corpses here, crystals of you. Still got it here. I'll tell you a story, make a skeleton cry. Oh, too deliciously lovely, going for